It was a bright spring morning when Emma decided to surprise her daughter, Sarah, with the most precious gift she could think of: a villa. Emma had always been a hard-working woman, having spent years running a small business, and now that she had retired, she felt it was time to give back to Sarah. After all, she had watched her daughter struggle through years of hard work, building a life with her husband, Ben, in a modest home. They had been through financial hardships, their dreams always just out of reach. The villa was located on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lush gardens and breathtaking views. Emma had saved for years to make this dream come true for Sarah. It wasn't just any gift. It was a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the desire to see her daughter live the life she deserved. She wanted Sarah to feel secure, to be proud of her accomplishments, and to finally have a home that matched her hard work. When Emma handed over the keys to Sarah and Ben, she saw the wide-eyed astonishment on her daughter's face. Sarah was speechless for a moment, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Ben stood beside her, equally shocked, but his expression was a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Are you sure, Mom? This is too much," Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Emma smiled softly. "It's yours, Sarah. You've earned it." Ben shook his head, unable to express his gratitude properly. He had always struggled to provide for his family, and the idea of owning a place like this seemed almost too good to be true. He had never been able to afford a luxury like this, but here it was, right in front of him. The day was filled with excitement as Sarah and Ben toured the villa, discussing how they would decorate it and make it their own. It was the first time in years that they could talk about their future without worrying about bills, loans, or debts. The villa would be their sanctuary, a place of peace, where they could finally breathe freely. But, unbeknownst to Emma, what seemed like a perfect start would soon turn into something far more complicated. As they settled into their new life, it became evident that Ben's family, who had always been somewhat involved in their lives, had begun to take more than a friendly interest in their new home. At first, it was small gestures. Ben's parents, who had always been fond of Sarah, would drop by for a visit every now and then. Then it became frequent visits, with his mother offering unsolicited advice on how the villa should be decorated and how Sarah should run her household. His father, too, would casually suggest changes to the garden or the layout of the rooms. Sarah didn't think much of it at first. She had always been close to Ben's family, and they were well-meaning. But as time went on, Emma started noticing that Ben's family was becoming more and more present, almost as if they were subtly taking over the space Sarah had once hoped to make her own. One afternoon, Emma stopped by the villa unannounced, hoping to surprise Sarah with a small gift of her own. But when she entered the house, what she saw was far from what she had imagined. Ben's parents were lounging comfortably in the living room, their belongings scattered across the villa as though they had always been there. Ben's mother was seated at the kitchen table, giving orders to Sarah on what kind of curtains she should buy, while his father was outside rearranging the furniture in the garden. Emma stood at the threshold, her heart sinking as she realized what was happening. The villa that she had gifted Sarah with so much love and intention had become a space that Ben's family seemed to believe they had a right to. Emma felt a deep pang of disappointment. It wasn't that she didn't love Ben's parents, but they had always been too controlling, always having a say in their lives. She had never expected them to take over Sarah's new home as if it were their own. Emma's emotions swirled between frustration and confusion. She had given Sarah this villa to create a space where she could thrive, not to have it swallowed up by the very people they had hoped to escape from. But she wasn't ready to confront Sarah yet. She wanted to understand the full extent of the situation before making any hasty decisions. As she left the villa, Emma's mind raced. She knew her daughter was too kind to say anything about it, too eager to please. But Emma wasn't the type to let things slide. She had fought hard for everything she had, and now she wouldn't let her daughter's dream home be overrun by anyone. It was time for a change. That evening, Emma sat in her small apartment, reflecting on the day. She needed to talk to Sarah to make sure her daughter was truly happy. But Emma also knew that sometimes words weren't enough. Sometimes a single line could change everything. And so she planned her next move, one that would forever alter the course of Sarah's new life. Weeks passed, and while Sarah and Ben were excited about their new life in the villa, the tension within the family began to grow. Emma had hoped that Sarah would find peace and happiness in her new home, but as the days went by, it became increasingly clear that something was wrong. Sarah, though grateful for the gift, had started feeling the weight of expectations pressing down on her from all sides. Her in-laws, who had always been present in their lives, were now taking over their home in ways that Sarah hadn't anticipated. At first, it was subtle. Ben's mother would stop by uninvited, bringing along bags of groceries and offering unsolicited advice on how to maintain the house. She would suggest the best way to arrange the furniture or which plants would thrive in the garden. It was harmless at first, but then it started to feel invasive. Every decision Sarah tried to make for her home was questioned. Her mother-in-law would suggest, then insist, that things be done her way. Ben's father, too, started to intrude in a way that Sarah found increasingly uncomfortable. He would show up unannounced, often staying for hours, acting as though the villa was his rightful place. His presence made Sarah uneasy, but she didn't want to cause any conflict. After all, they were family, and she had always been taught to respect her elders. She kept quiet, hoping it was just a phase, but the behavior continued to escalate. One evening, Ben's parents arrived early as usual. This time, they brought a contractor with them. Ben's father, without consulting Sarah or Ben, had already made plans to renovate the kitchen, suggesting that the villa's design wasn't up to his standards. Sarah was taken aback. This was their home, not his. It was the first time she truly felt like an outsider in her own space. "Don't you think the kitchen could be a little bigger?" Ben's father asked, his tone casual, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. Sarah tried to smile, feeling the pressure mounting. "I think it's fine the way it is," she replied softly, hoping the conversation would end there. But it didn't. "Oh, I'm sure, but we'll make sure it's perfect for you. Just wait, it'll be better," he said, almost dismissively, as he turned back to the contractor. Ben stood by, not saying anything. Sarah looked to him for support, but he was distracted, chatting with his father about the renovation plans. She felt invisible, her feelings being ignored once again. It was as though her voice didn't matter anymore, and the villa she had dreamed of, the place she had hoped would be her sanctuary, was slowly being taken away from her. That night, As Sarah lay in bed beside Ben, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The villa, once a symbol of freedom and hope, now felt like a gilded cage. The walls seemed to close in on her with every passing day, and the air was thick with the unspoken tension. Her in-laws' presence loomed over her like a shadow. "Ben, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice tinged with frustration. Ben turned to her, his expression softening. "What's wrong?" "It's your parents. They keep coming over, and now they're making decisions about the house without asking me," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I feel like I'm losing control here. This is supposed to be our home, not theirs." Ben sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Sarah, they mean well. You know how my mom is. She just wants to help. And Dad, he's only trying to make things better. I know they mean well, but I don't want them taking over everything," Sarah replied, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "This was supposed to be our fresh start, but now, I don't know what to do." Ben's face hardened, and he sat up, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know what you want me to say. They're my parents. I can't just shut them out." Sarah's heart sank. This wasn't the support she had hoped for. It was as if her feelings didn't matter to him as much as keeping the peace with his parents. She had always known that Ben was close to his family, but this was different. The villa was supposed to be their place to make their own decisions, their own future, but instead, it was becoming a battleground. As the days went by, the pressure only mounted. Emma, who had always been the pillar of strength for Sarah, sensed something was wrong. She called her daughter one afternoon, asking if she was okay. Sarah tried to brush it off, but Emma could hear the strain in her voice. "What's going on, sweetheart? I know something's bothering you," Emma said gently. Sarah paused, her heart aching. She wanted to tell her mother everything, but she didn't want to burden her. She didn't want to admit that the dream Emma had given her was turning into a nightmare, but the weight of the situation was becoming too much to bear. I don't know, Mom," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I feel like I'm losing control of my own life. Ben's family. They're taking over everything. I thought this villa was our fresh start, but it feels like it's slipping away." Emma's heart broke for her daughter. She had given this gift with the hope of seeing Sarah happy, not watching her struggle in a home that was meant to bring her joy. Emma's protective instincts kicked in. She knew it was time for her to step in, to take control of the situation before things spiraled out of hand. "Sarah, you're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together," Emma reassured her, her voice filled with determination. But deep down, Emma knew that it wouldn't be easy. Ben's family was entrenched in their lives, and removing their influence would be far more complicated than she had imagined. It was time to take a stand, not just for Sarah, but for the future of their family. One line, one powerful statement, was all it would take to change everything. But would Sarah be ready to hear it? Would she find the courage to stand up for herself, for her marriage, and for the future she had envisioned in that villa? As the weeks passed, the tension within Sarah's home reached a breaking point. Emma had noticed a distinct change in her daughter's demeanor during their phone calls. Sarah had become quieter, more withdrawn, and her usual spark seemed to have dimmed. Emma could hear the frustration in Sarah's voice every time they spoke. and it was clear to her that her daughter was no longer content with the situation in the villa. The dream home she had once been so excited about had turned into a suffocating prison, and Emma could only wonder how much longer Sarah would be able to endure it. One afternoon, Emma decided to visit. She had to see for herself what was going on and try to understand the depths of Sarah's unhappiness. She drove to the villa, her heart heavy with concern. When she arrived, she found Sarah in the kitchen, staring blankly at the countertop. Ben was nowhere in sight, and the absence of his usual presence made the house feel eerily quiet. "Sarah?" Emma called softly, her voice carrying through the stillness of the home. Sarah turned, her eyes filled with exhaustion. She had been awake for hours, dealing with the never-ending disruptions from Ben's parents. That morning, her mother-in-law had called yet again to offer advice on what color the bedroom walls should be painted. Her father-in-law had spent hours in the garden, rearranging the flower beds without asking for her input. It felt like she had no say in the house she was supposed to be building a life in. "I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice strained. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." Emma immediately stepped closer, her protective instincts kicking in. She placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder and led her to the living room, where they could sit down in privacy. "What's going on, sweetheart? You don't seem like yourself." Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She had tried so hard to keep it together, to make everyone happy, but now it was all unraveling. "I'm losing myself, Mom. I don't know who I am anymore. Ben's family, they won't stop. They're taking over everything, and it feels like no one is listening to me." Emma's heart ached for her daughter. She knew Sarah had always been the type to avoid confrontation, to put others' needs before her own. But seeing her so defeated made Emma realize just how much her daughter had sacrificed. Sarah had tried so hard to make this new life work, but it seemed like every time she took a step forward, she was pushed 2 steps back. "What do you mean, Sarah?" Emma asked gently, trying to understand the full extent of her daughter's feelings. "The kitchen?" "Ben's dad called a contractor to redo the whole thing," Sarah explained, her voice shaking. "I wasn't even consulted. And his mom keeps telling me what I should do with the house, like she's in charge. It's not my home anymore. It's like they've taken over." Emma sat back, her mind racing. She had given Sarah this villa, with the hope that it would be a fresh start, a place where she could finally feel in control. But instead, it had become a battleground, a place where Sarah's dreams were being overshadowed by Ben's parents. Emma couldn't stand to see her daughter so helpless. "What did Ben say about all this?" Emma asked, concern growing in her voice. Sarah sighed deeply. "He says he doesn't want to upset anyone. He's so used to them being involved in everything that he doesn't even see it anymore. But I can't keep pretending that it's okay. I don't know who to talk to anymore." Emma could see the pain in her daughter's eyes, and it made her heart ache. She knew that Sarah had always tried to please everyone, but now it was time for her to stand up for herself. "You don't have to do this alone, Sarah," Emma said firmly. "This is your life, your home, and you deserve to have a voice in it." Sarah shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know if I can. I don't want to cause problems. But I feel like I'm losing myself. I've already lost so much of who I am. I'm not happy, Mom." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Emma's heart broke for her daughter, but she knew that Sarah couldn't keep carrying this burden on her own. You don't have to lose yourself in this, sweetheart. You deserve to feel at peace in your own home. It's time to speak up. It's time to take control of your life again. Sarah looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. What do you mean? I think it's time to have a conversation with Ben, Emma said, her voice resolute. You need to tell him how you feel, and you need to set boundaries with his family. It's not just about the house, it's about your happiness, and you can't keep sacrificing your well-being to keep the peace. Sarah felt a rush of emotions. She had never imagined that her relationship with Ben's family would become so complicated. She had tried so hard to make everything work, to be the perfect wife and daughter-in-law. But somewhere along the way, she had forgotten about herself. Now, as she looked at her mother, she realized that Emma was right. It was time for a change. The conversation was long overdue. Sarah knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. She needed to reclaim her space, her life, and her happiness. The villa could be the sanctuary she had always dreamed of, but only if she was willing to fight for it. "Okay, Mom," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with determination. "I'll talk to him. It's time to make things right." Emma smiled, softly, relief washing over her. "You're stronger than you think, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she felt a sense of resolve settle in her chest. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something new. It was time to take control of her life, to stop letting others dictate her happiness. The villa would be her home once more, not just for her and Ben, but for the future they could build together. But it would only happen if she found the courage to speak her truth. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling a mix of fear and determination. The conversation with her mother had been a turning point, but now it was time to face the person who had the power to change everything. Ben. She knew that speaking her truth wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when inside she felt suffocated by the pressure of Ben's family's influence. The villa was supposed to be their escape, their fresh start, but instead, it had become a constant reminder of how little control she had over her own life. As Ben walked into the kitchen that morning, his usual smile faded when he saw the look on Sarah's face. There was a heaviness in the air that he couldn't ignore. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. Sarah took a deep breath and turned to face him. She knew this was it, the moment when everything would change. "Ben, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And it's not going to be easy." Ben raised an eyebrow, his confusion deepening. "What do you mean? What's going on?" "I can't keep pretending everything is fine," Sarah began, her heart pounding in her chest. "I feel like I'm losing myself here, Ben. Your parents, they're taking over everything. They're rearranging our house, making decisions, without asking me, and I don't have a say in anything. I don't feel like I live here anymore." Ben stood frozen for a moment, his brow furrowing as he processed what Sarah was saying. "What are you talking about? My parents just want to help. They're not trying to take over." "But they are, Ben." Sarah's voice cracked with frustration. "They're everywhere. They keep telling me what I should do with the house, how it should look, how I should live. It's not their home. It's ours. I need space to make my own decisions." I need to feel like I matter in this relationship and in this home. Ben's face softened, but his defensive instincts kicked. And Sarah, they're my family. They just want the best for us. I understand that, but it's not about what's best for us. It's about what's best for them. Sarah's voice was rising now, the weight of her frustration finally breaking free. They've been controlling everything, Ben. I can't even walk into my own kitchen without feeling like it's theirs. And it's not just about the house. It's about how they treat me like I'm not capable of making decisions for myself. Ben's expression shifted from confusion to guilt, but he still wasn't fully grasping the depth of Sarah's pain. I didn't know you felt this way. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Sarah's eyes welled up with tears, the emotion that had been building up for so long finally spilling over. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought I could just go along with it, but I can't anymore. I'm drowning, Ben. I'm losing myself in this. I thought this villa would be a fresh start for us, a place where we could build our lives together. But instead, I'm just fighting for a little bit of control. Ben's face softened with guilt, and he reached out to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't realize. I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping the peace with my parents. I never meant to make you feel like this? Sarah held on to him, letting herself lean into his warmth, but her heart was heavy. She had spent so long trying to make things work, trying to keep everyone happy. But now, it was clear that it had come at the expense of her own well-being. She wasn't just upset about the house, though that was part of it. She was upset because she felt invisible in her own life, like her feelings and needs didn't matter as much as keeping the peace with Ben's parents. I love you, Ben, she whispered, but I need to know that you're on my side. I need to know that you see me, that you hear me. Ben pulled back slightly, his hand gently cupping her cheek as he looked into her eyes. I do, Sarah. I hear you. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. You matter, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you feel heard, respected, and loved. We're in this together, I promise. Sarah nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. It wasn't going to be easy, but she felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't alone. Ben had heard her, and he was willing to make changes. But it wasn't just about him. It was about her finding her voice, her strength to stand up for what she needed. We need to set some boundaries with your family, Sarah said firmly. They can't keep invading our space like this. We have to take control of our own lives again. Ben looked at her with a mixture of regret and determination. You're right. I'll talk to them. We'll make sure this doesn't happen. Again. The conversation was long overdue, but it was just the beginning. Sarah knew that reclaiming control over her home and her life wouldn't happen overnight. There would be difficult conversations, awkward moments, and uncomfortable changes. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a partner who was willing to stand beside her and fight for their future. That afternoon, as Sarah and Ben sat down together, ready to face the challenges ahead, Sarah felt a sense of relief she hadn't experienced in weeks. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step forward. She was no longer willing to be silenced, to let her happiness be dictated by others. She was ready to take back control of her life and her villa once and for all. The days that followed Sarah and Ben's confrontation were filled with a mix of relief and apprehension. Sarah had spoken her truth, and Ben had finally acknowledged the problem. But now the real work was about to begin. The conversation with her husband was only the first step. Now it was time to set the boundaries that would ensure their marriage, and home could thrive without the overbearing influence of Ben's family. After their emotional talk, Ben had promised Sarah that he would talk to his parents and set things straight. Sarah had hoped for a quick resolution, but deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that easy. Ben's parents had been an integral part of their lives for so long, and their influence wouldn't vanish overnight. It was going to take time and strength for Ben to stand up to them and for Sarah to keep pushing for the respect and space she deserved. The morning after their conversation, Ben sat Sarah down at the breakfast table, his expression serious, but filled with determination. "I called my parents," he began. "We're going to have a conversation tonight. I need to make things clear with them. It's time for them to understand that this is our home, and they need to respect our boundaries." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. At last, Ben was taking action, but she also felt a twinge of anxiety. She knew how strong-willed his parents were. They had always expected things to go their way, and Ben had spent most of his life trying to keep the peace between them and Sarah. This wasn't going to be a simple conversation. It was going to be a test of Ben's commitment to their marriage and their future. That evening, Ben's parents arrived at the villa, just as expected. Sarah had spent the day in quiet anticipation, trying to prepare herself for what was to come. The air was thick with tension as they greeted each other in the living room. Ben's mother, dressed in her usual over-the-top manner, walked in first, beaming as though everything was still as it had always been. She was carrying a basket of fresh flowers, her way of helping with the housewarming. Ben's father, quiet and watchful, followed behind her, his eyes scanning the room as though he were mentally rearranging the furniture in his mind. "Look at this place," Ben's mother exclaimed, setting the basket on the coffee table. "It's lovely, but, it could use a few more touches here and there. Maybe some new curtains in the living room, some brighter colors in the bedroom. Have you thought about changing the layout of the garden?" Sarah felt her blood pressure rise, but she stayed quiet, hoping this conversation would go the way Ben had promised. Ben, standing beside her, shot his mother a glance, a silent signal for her to hold off. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's something that Sarah and I need to address with you." Ben's mother raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the tone in his voice. She had always been the one to take charge, to dictate what happened in their lives. Ben's father, on the other hand, just nodded, sensing that something was different this time. "Go ahead, Ben," his father said quietly. "We're listening." Ben took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between his parents and Sarah. "We appreciate all the help you've given us over the years, but Sarah and I need to make it clear that this is our home. We've talked about it, and we've agreed that we need some space. We need to make our own decisions here. We need to feel like we have control over our lives and our home." Ben's mother's face immediately soured. "What do you mean? Space? I'm just trying to help. I've always helped you two, and I thought you'd appreciate it." "I do appreciate your help, Mom," Ben said, his voice steady. "But it's not about help anymore. It's about respect. We're not asking you to stop caring for us, but we need you to understand that we're capable of making our own decisions. This house, this life, it's ours, and we need it to be ours. without interference. The room was silent for a moment. Sarah could feel her heart racing as she watched Ben's parents process his words. Ben's mother was fuming, but she was silent for once. Ben's father, who had always been the quieter of the two, looked at his son with an expression of mild surprise, as though he hadn't realized the extent of Ben's feelings. "I'm not saying we want to cut ties or stop seeing you," Ben continued, his tone now softer. "We just need some boundaries. We can't keep letting you make decisions for us, especially when it comes to our home." Ben's mother crossed her arms, clearly upset, but she finally nodded. "I don't like it," she said, her voice tight. "But if that's how you feel, I suppose we'll respect it. I just hope you don't forget who helped you get to where you are." Sarah's chest tightened. She had feared this response from Ben's mother. She had always felt that Ben's family believed they were the reason for their success. They had always been there to offer advice, whether it was wanted or not, and now it seemed they felt entitled to a piece of everything. "We won't forget," Ben replied firmly. "But we need to move forward, Sarah and I. This is about our future, not just the past." The conversation shifted then, from heated words to a quieter, more contemplative tone. Ben's parents seemed to digest the gravity of what was happening. The awkwardness lingered, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she could breathe. She had been afraid that Ben would back down, but he hadn't. He had stood up for their marriage, for their home, and for their future. He had chosen her. As Ben's parents began to leave, they were quieter than usual, their faces somber. It wasn't the triumphant resolution Sarah had hoped for, but it was a beginning, a step in the right direction. As the door closed behind them, Sarah looked at Ben, her heart full of gratitude and love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing by me." Ben smiled, pulling her close. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." The weight that had been pressing on Sarah's shoulders for so long seemed to lift, and for the first time since they had moved into the villa, she felt a sense of peace. There was still work to be done, and the journey wasn't over. But for now, Sarah knew that the hardest part was behind them. They had set the boundaries, and with Ben by her side, she felt ready to take on whatever came next. The weeks following, the confrontation with Ben's parents were filled with quiet transformation. The villa, which had once felt like a suffocating cage, now felt more like a home, a place where Sarah and Ben could truly begin their life together on their own terms. But the journey to reclaiming their space was far from easy. It wasn't just about drawing boundaries with Ben's family. It was about rebuilding trust, creating a new dynamic, and learning how to make decisions as a united front. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of freedom that she hadn't experienced since moving into the villa. The constant pressure from Ben's parents had lifted, and though it hadn't been an easy road, she began to find joy in the simple things again. She started decorating the villa with a new sense of ownership, picking out furniture, choosing colors that made her feel at peace, and rearranging the space so that it reflected both her and Ben's personalities. The villa no longer felt like a house on loan. It felt like their home, a place where their love could grow without external interference. Ben, too, seemed to be changing. After their heartfelt conversation, he became more attuned to Sarah's needs, more aware of how his family's influence had affected their relationship. He started prioritizing Sarah's feelings, setting clearer boundaries with his parents, and making sure that their relationship was always at the forefront of his decisions. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension when it came to his family, but Ben had learned the importance of balance. He had learned that protecting their marriage meant sometimes standing up to the people he loved. One Sunday morning, Sarah found herself in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The sunlight poured through the windows, casting a warm glow over the countertops. The house was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment. She looked around, noticing the small changes she had made to the space, the new curtains in the living room, the plants she had carefully placed on the windowsills, the family photos she had arranged on the walls. This wasn't just a house. It was a reflection of who they were together, and she felt proud of the life they were building. Ben walked into the kitchen, still half asleep, a sleepy smile on his face. He wrapped his arms around Sarah from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice warm and affectionate. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of love wash over her. "Morning," she replied softly. She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes meeting his. "I'm really happy here, Ben." Ben's smile widened, and he gently kissed her forehead. "Me too," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "We've worked hard to get to this point, Sarah. I want us to keep growing together. I want this to be the start of something even better." They stood there for a moment, embracing the quiet peace of the morning, both of them feeling a deep sense of relief. It had taken a lot of work to get here, but they had done it together. They had found their way back to each other, and in doing so, they had reclaimed the space that was truly theirs. It was no longer about appeasing anyone else or living up to anyone's expectations. It was about them, as a couple, building the life they wanted. Later that day, Ben suggested they visit his parents to thank them for respecting their wishes. Sarah had been hesitant at first, unsure of how things would go, but Ben assured her that it was the right thing to do. It was important to show gratitude and maintain a healthy relationship, but this time it would be on their terms. As they drove to Ben's parents' house, Sarah felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She wasn't sure what kind of reception they would get, but she knew that she was no longer the same person she had been when they had first moved into the villa. She had found her voice, and she wasn't afraid to speak up when something didn't feel right. When they arrived, Ben's mother greeted them warmly, though Sarah noticed that her smile was tinged with a hint of awkwardness. Ben's father was more subdued, but his nod of acknowledgement was genuine. The tension from before still lingered, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been. There was a sense of understanding now, an unspoken acknowledgement that things had changed. "We just wanted to thank you both for understanding our need for space," Ben said, his voice calm but firm. "We're grateful for everything you've done for us, but Sarah and I need to make our own decisions now. We hope you can respect that." Ben's mother nodded, though Sarah could see the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "We understand, Ben. It's just hard to let go. We've always been so involved in your lives." "I know," Ben replied, "but Sarah and I are building our own future now. We want to make our own mistakes and learn from them. We want to do things our way." There was a pause, and for a moment, it felt like no one knew exactly how to move forward. But then, Ben's mother gave a small smile, and Ben's father gave a grunt of acknowledgement. "We'll respect your wishes," Ben's father said, his voice gruff but sincere. "You two are adults now. We just want the best for you." The conversation that followed was less strained, and while there was still some underlying tension, it was clear that progress had been made. Ben's parents had accepted their boundaries, and while it was a difficult adjustment for them, they understood that it was necessary for Sarah and Ben to have their own space. On the drive back to the villa, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges to face, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like they were on the right path. She had stood up for herself, and Ben had stood by her side. Together, they had created a life that was truly theirs, a life free from the weight of others' expectations. As they pulled into the driveway of their villa, Sarah looked at Ben, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "For everything, for standing by me. I'm so glad we're in this together." Ben smiled and reached over to take her hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Sarah. This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah believed it. The villa was no longer just a house. It was a home, built on love, trust, and the strength they had found in each other. The journey wasn't over, but it was theirs to navigate together.